Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. Missing the summer and that great summer job? Or maybe you couldn't wait to get away from it. If you like your dose of terror with a bit of truth, check out this terrifying tale that Doughboy420 likes to call The Cursed Springs.
When I was about 20 years old, give or take a year, I worked for the Pennsylvania Conservation Corps, or PCC. PCC was a state job that paid minimum wage, and we got paid bi-weekly. Our job was to clean up state parks and wildlife areas. It was a pretty good deal, because since it was a state job, we had to have high school diplomas or its equivalent in order to work for the state. And I had quit school when I was 17 due to them being full of crap. Now, I don't recommend quitting school, not by any means. But that's besides the point. The point is, PCC paid for me to get my GED, and I was also allowed to study for 2 hours a day. So, in other words, I was being paid to study, which I have to admit was pretty sweet. The rest of my job consisted of cleaning up trash, fixing things, and building cabins within Salt Springs State Park. The park got its name from a sulfuric saltwater spring that used to be used for its healing properties a long time ago, but now it had just become a camping destination. I worked there with my friends, Caleb, Dustin, DJ, and also Miranda, whom I had just met on the job. Then, there was our boss, Bill. Bill was a bit of an odd guy, but he wasn't that bad of a guy, really. One day, while we were working on one of the cabins, he had sawn the end of a board off, leaving a trapezoidal piece of scrap. Then, I shit you not, he picked up this piece of wood and started yelling, "Trapezoidea! Trapezoidea!" to Miranda, DJ, and I. I think he drank a bit too much, which was later pretty much proven when Miranda found a cooler full of beer in the back of his truck. Also, sometimes, if we were taking too long, screwing in a screw or hammering in a nail, he would yell, "In there!" in a gruff voice. The guy was indeed pretty odd, but again, he was a good guy. But it was still a fun job. I liked it quite a bit. I got paid to study and to fix up the state park that I loved and had been going to with my friends and family with for years. But the problem was, I liked the job. Past tense. Things started to change around the place. Bill started to act weird, even for him. He seemed paranoid, always looking over his shoulder, and it wasn't too long until we discovered why. I had been riding into work in the morning with DJ, and one day, when we had arrived at work, we discovered the second-floor window of the old carriage house was wide open. There were only 4 buildings on the property, aside from the cabins that we were building and the public bathroom, an old barn, and 2 old houses that had been there since the 1800s, and an old carriage house. And the carriage house's second-story window was wide open and was supposed to be locked from the inside by a deadbolt. Bill took DJ with him into the building to look for intruders and to see if anything was taken, while Miranda and I waited outside. Caleb and Dustin had not yet arrived. DJ closed the window, and the two of them came out of the building, locking the door behind him, and then Bill took the key into the barn, which worked as kind of the main workspace of the job, where we would construct most of the things we needed. Nothing had been stolen, and we all just shrugged it off as someone playing some kind of stupid joke. But it was when it happened again. And then, again, that things started to get weird. Bill had taken the key into the barn, but the window was still coming open during the night, and we each took turns closing it. After DJ, Caleb, and Dustin had went up and closed the damn window, Bill decided to remove the key from the park to prevent any more stupid pranks by stupid kids. It seemed like the problem had been solved, and for a few weeks, the window didn't open. But then one day, when we came into work, there it was, wide open and swinging gently in the wind. And not only that, the wooden door at the opposite end of the building was also wide open, and it was my turn to go in and close them. I got out of the car, hoping I wouldn't have to go into that carriage house, but Bill pulled in and stopped me. He had gone and gotten the key from his house, 10 miles away, after he saw that the window and door were wide open. Bill unlocked the front door of the building so that I would have an exit after closing the window and the back door. I entered the carriage house and walked to the opposite end to close the door. I was surprised at how difficult it was to close the door. It actually took some force to lock the large deadbolt on the door, meaning it probably took just as much force, if not more, to unlock it. I then walked across the dirty floors and looked around at the spiderweb-ridden ceiling and all the old things that were left over from the family that used to live here a long, long time ago. The old farming equipment, like a scythe and an old plow, that used to be pulled by horses before the invention of the motor vehicle. I climbed the stairs up to the second floor. The window was right at the top of the stairs, and thankfully I didn't have to climb all the way up the stairs to close it, but I would have to climb nearly to the top just to reach the deadbolt of the window. The second floor was completely dark, and the light from the open window only lit up a few feet in before the darkness seemed to swallow it, and the rest of the second floor, which was more like an attic, was completely black, aside from a single hole of light at the far side of the building, where there was a small hole in the wall. The second floor of this building felt extremely uncomfortable to me for some reason. It felt like I was being watched during the entire time I was up there, and on top of that fact, the only key to this place was in the boss's house, 10 miles away, and that no one could have possibly gotten into the building just made things even more uncomfortable. I quickly closed the window and locked it into place before running down the stairs and outside, where Bill closed and the door behind me before putting the key into his pocket. The rest of the week was pretty uneventful, but I still couldn't get over how difficult it was to lock the deadbolt of that back door. Whoever or whatever had opened it up must have been pretty strong. At the end of the week, DJ and I were in the basement of the old white house that sat next to the carriage house. We were re-cementing the floor because it was filled with dips where pieces of the floor had somehow been chipped away over time. One corner of the room had even broken away so much that the dirt beneath had become visible. The basement had old stonework walls and was separated into 3 rooms by unfinished wooden skeletons of walls, so you could see right through the entire basement, and to be honest, the place was pretty creepy just by itself. But what happened that day made it even worse. DJ had gone outside the barn to get another bag of cement to mix up in the old green wheelbarrow that we had brought into the basement. I was left down into the basement to continue laying the cement. I sat there on the cold floor and slid my trowel over the uneven surface of the floor, laying the cement and evening out the surface to a flat grade. As I sat there, running my trowel across the floor, I began to hear a scratching noise. It wasn't like a rat scratching in the walls or anything. It was more like the sound of feet dragging across the floor. I ignored it and continued my work, figuring that it probably was just that, someone dragging their feet on the floor upstairs. Then, I heard it again, and this time, I realized that scratchy, dragging sound was not coming from upstairs, but instead, it was coming from the area of the room behind me where we had already finished laying the cement. I turned around to see if there was anything behind me, but there was nothing. I was a bit unnerved by this, but I continued my work. A few moments passed before I heard the sound again. This time, it was a bit closer to me. I spun around on the floor and froze in terror. The floor that DJ and I had just finished was now covered in footprints, sunken into the still wet cement. It appeared as though someone had walked barefoot across the floor. Not just one path, but several. The footprints were all in a manner of directions scattered across the entire floor. I looked down and found that the footprints stopped right behind me, and I noticed something odd about the prints. They didn't look human. I mean, they were human-shaped, but something was off about them. The toes were kind of pointed, and there were dots pressed into the cement at each tip of each digit, like claws had dug into the floor. It was then that my eyes trailed over to the dark corner where the floor had been chipped away to reveal the dirt. The lights that hung in the basement were bright, and the corner shouldn't have been as dark as it was. Then, I saw the darkness in the corner move. It kind of twitched and turned, as though it had been looking into the corner, but then turned to look at me. I jumped a bit, but was still frozen in terror. The shadow lunged forward and appeared to charge at me. This was the moment that snapped me back to reality. I jumped to my feet, and within seconds, I ran up the stairs and through the outside cellar doors of the basement to the parking lot outside. I told Caleb and DJ what had happened to me and refused to go back into the basement. They too saw the footprints in the basement and, despite their fear, they volunteered to finish the floor. That day, I left work and was unsure if I would ever go back. But my decision was made for me. That weekend was the flood of 2006. My mom and I gathered what we could from our trailer and went to my grandma's house in the next town over to wait out the storm. When we returned to the trailer the next day, it was gone. It had been washed several hundred feet away, and nearly everything that remained in the trailer had been destroyed by the floodwaters. I felt like this was more than just an act of God. It felt more like an act of something else, and I took it as a sign. I called in to Bill and quit, and I never went back.
Well, sometimes the pay is worth it, and sometimes it's not. But either way, it seems like more than Uncle Sam is after your paycheck, up to and including demons from another realm. I suppose their unemployment benefits ran out too. Anyway, if you need more fear to feast on, make sure to stop back again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can catch you all again next Saturday.